Father's Day insult, stolen cash, then the jackpot. She demanded millions. I offered $1 and a choice that could cost her everything. The sound of laughter filled my dining room as plates clinked and Father's Day conversations flowed around the table. I should have felt grateful. My family gathered together, sharing stories and enjoying the meal I'd spent hours preparing. But something felt different this year. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on until my daughter Melissa stood up with that practiced smile I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Before we finish dinner, I have Father's Day gifts for the most important fathers in my life," she announced, her voice carrying that theatrical quality she used for special occasions. I watched from my seat at the head of the table as she reached behind her chair, producing 2 distinctly different packages. One was elegantly wrapped in expensive paper with a silk ribbon that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The other was a small, hastily wrapped item that looked like it had been picked up at the last minute. "Eric," she said, turning to her father-in-law with genuine excitement, "this is for everything you've done for our family." Eric straightened in his chair, his perfectly pressed shirt catching the afternoon light streaming through my modest dining room windows. At 68, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about money, never wondered if he could afford his next meal or whether his car would make it through another winter. The expensive package revealed cruise tickets, not just any cruise tickets, but premium accommodations for a 2-week Mediterranean voyage, the kind of vacation I'd dreamed about but never imagined I could afford. "Melissa, this is incredible," Eric said, examining the golden embossed tickets with obvious satisfaction. "First-class accommodations, private balcony, all meals included. This must have cost a fortune." My daughter beamed with pride. "Nothing's too good for family who truly supports us. You deserve the absolute best for everything you've provided over the years." The praise continued as Eric shared details about the cruise itinerary, the exclusive dining options, the luxury amenities. I found myself calculating in my head. This kind of vacation had to cost at least $10,000, maybe more. Where had Melissa gotten that kind of money? Then she turned to me with what I can only describe as an afterthought smile. "And Dad, here's something for you." She tossed the small package across the table with casual indifference. It landed near my plate with a soft thud, and I immediately knew what it was before unwrapping it. The distinctive shape, the lightweight feel. A lottery ticket. "A lottery ticket," I said, trying to keep any disappointment from my voice. "Not just any lottery ticket," Melissa replied with a laugh that had an edge to it. "That's a Powerball ticket. If you win big, just remember, I bought it, so technically half belongs to me." The words hit me like cold water. Half belongs to me. Not, "I hope you win something nice," or "Wouldn't it be fun if this brought you luck?" Instead, she was already claiming ownership of winnings that didn't exist yet from a gift that had cost her exactly $2. I looked around the table at the faces of my family members. My sister Margaret had stopped eating, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. My nephew Tommy was staring at his plate like he'd discovered something fascinating in his mashed potatoes. Even Eric seemed momentarily uncomfortable, though he quickly returned to admiring his cruise tickets. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Eric received a luxury vacation worth more than my monthly pension. I received a lottery ticket with strings attached, strings that turned even this modest gift into a potential source of conflict. "Well," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my voice, "I suppose stranger things have happened than winning the lottery." "Just don't forget our agreement," Melissa said, wagging her finger at me with mock seriousness that felt more serious than mock. 50-50 split if those numbers come up. I slipped the lottery ticket into my shirt pocket and tried to focus on finishing dinner, but questions kept circling in my mind. How had Melissa afforded such an expensive gift for Eric? Where had $13,000 come from? We'd never discussed her finances in detail, but I knew she and her husband David weren't exactly rolling in money. The conversation moved on to other topics: Eric's upcoming retirement plans, Tommy's new job, Margaret's garden club activities, normal family discussions that should have felt comfortable and familiar. Instead, I found myself studying my daughter's face, trying to understand when she'd started viewing our relationship as some kind of transaction. After dinner, as everyone prepared to leave, Eric pulled me aside in my kitchen while Melissa gathered her purse and keys. "Steve, I want you to know how much I appreciate Melissa's thoughtfulness," he said, his hand resting on my shoulder with paternal authority. She's learned to recognize quality and value. That's something that comes from understanding how the world really works. The implication hung in the air between us. Eric's worldview was one where expensive gifts demonstrated love, where financial success translated directly to personal worth, where a $13,000 cruise ticket represented genuine appreciation, while a $2 lottery ticket represented… what exactly? "I'm sure you'll enjoy the vacation," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Oh, I intend to. Mediterranean cruises are extraordinary experiences. The history, the culture, the cuisine. It's the kind of journey that creates lasting memories." He glanced toward the dining room where my lottery ticket lay forgotten on the table. Simple pleasures have their place, of course, but there's something to be said for experiencing the finer things in life. After they left, I sat alone at my dining table, looking at the scattered remnants of our Father's Day celebration. Crumpled napkins, empty glasses, and that lottery ticket sitting where Melissa had tossed it like an afterthought. I picked up the ticket and examined the numbers printed on the cheap paper. 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, with a Powerball number of 18. Random digits that meant nothing to anyone, least of all me. The odds of winning were astronomical, something like 1 in 300 million. I had a better chance of being struck by lightning while being attacked by a shark. But as I held that flimsy piece of paper, I couldn't stop thinking about Melissa's casual claim to half the winnings. The entitlement in her voice when she'd announced our supposed agreement, the way she'd thrown it across the table like she was feeding scraps to a dog. This wasn't about the lottery ticket itself. This was about what it represented. A daughter who saw her father as someone deserving of afterthoughts while lavishing expensive gifts on others. Someone whose potential good fortune was already being divided up before it even existed. I walked to my kitchen sink and stared out the window at my small backyard, where evening shadows were beginning to lengthen across the grass I'd mowed that morning in preparation for family dinner. The same yard where I'd taught Melissa to ride a bicycle, where we'd had birthday parties and barbecues and countless ordinary moments that had once felt like the foundation of our relationship. When had that changed? When had I become the father who deserved lottery tickets while Eric deserved luxury cruises? When had my love and sacrifice over 32 years been reduced to a $2 afterthought? The lottery ticket crinkled in my hand as I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet. Not because I believed it would win anything, but because it had become a symbol of something I was only beginning to understand. A reminder of how little I apparently meant to the person I'd devoted my life to raising and supporting. Tomorrow I would go back to my routine, my morning coffee, my modest breakfast, my careful budgeting that allowed me to live comfortably on my pension without asking anyone for help. I would tend my garden, read my books, maybe call Margaret to discuss what had happened at dinner. A simple life that apparently wasn't worth celebrating with anything more than random numbers on a piece of paper. But tonight, I sat in my quiet kitchen and wondered when exactly I'd become invisible to my own daughter and whether there was anything left of the relationship we'd once shared. 3 days passed before I found the courage to check my bank statement online. I'd been avoiding it, that familiar ritual of reviewing monthly expenses that had become more painful since my wife passed away 5 years ago. Living on a pension meant every dollar mattered, every purchase required consideration. I sat at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, laptop open to my banking page, scrolling through the usual entries. Grocery store purchases, utility bills, the pharmacy where I picked up my blood pressure medication. Everything looked normal until I reached a transaction that made my breath catch in my throat. Premium travel services, $13.47. I stared at the screen, certain there had to be some mistake. I hadn't booked any travel. I hadn't even left town in over a year. My hands trembled as I clicked on the transaction details, hoping for some explanation that would make sense of this impossible charge. The date was from the previous week, just days before Father's Day dinner. The same time frame when Melissa would have been shopping for gifts. A cold realization began settling in my stomach like a stone. Years ago, after my wife's death, I'd added Melissa as an authorized user on my account. It seemed practical at the time. She could help with emergencies, handle things if I was ever hospitalized or incapacitated. I'd forgotten all about that arrangement until this moment. My fingers shook as I reached for my phone and dialed her number. Each ring felt like an eternity. my mind racing through possibilities, hoping desperately that I was wrong about what this meant. "Hi, Dad," she answered, her voice bright and casual. "What's up?" "Melissa, I'm looking at my bank statement," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a charge for over $13,000 to premium travel services." Silence stretched across the line. Then, a laugh that sounded forced and artificial. "Oh, I was going to talk to you about that." "You were going to talk to me about taking $13,000 from my account without permission?" "Dad, don't be dramatic. Eric deserves something special for everything he's done for our family. You weren't using that money anyway. It was just sitting there." The casual dismissal of my life savings hit me like a physical blow. Money I'd carefully set aside from my pension each month, money that represented security in my old age, money I'd saved by eating generic groceries and driving my 15-year-old car until the wheels fell off. "Melissa, that's stealing. You took my money without asking." "Yeah, it's not stealing when it's family money," she snapped, her voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "And Eric has always been there for us financially. He helped us buy our house, paid for David's business startup, covers so many expenses. This was just returning the favor." "I'm your father," I said, my voice breaking. "I raised you. I worked 2 jobs to pay for your college education. I was there for every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every milestone in your life." "And Eric helped us move beyond all that," she interrupted. "He's shown us what real success looks like, what it means to live well, to be generous with people who matter." People who matter. The words echoed in my mind like a death sentence. "So I don't matter?" Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You did what fathers are supposed to do, Dad. Eric went above and beyond." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. I set it down carefully on the kitchen table and looked around my modest home with new eyes. The furniture I'd bought piece by piece over the years, the family photos that chronicled Melissa's childhood, the careful decorations that made this house feel like home despite my limited budget. All of it suddenly felt hollow, like a stage set for a play that nobody wanted to watch. I walked to my wallet and pulled out the lottery ticket, studying those meaningless numbers once again. 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, Powerball 18. The $2 consolation prize bought with my own stolen money. The irony was perfect in its cruelty. Even this pathetic gesture had been purchased with funds taken from my account without permission. I'd been robbed to pay for my own Father's Day gift, then told I should be grateful for the privilege. I crumpled the ticket in my fist and walked to the kitchen trash can, ready to throw it away with the rest of my illusions about family loyalty. But something stopped me at the last second. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was spite, but I smoothed out the paper and tucked it back into my wallet. If this ticket was all I had to show for 32 years of fatherhood, then I'd keep it as a reminder. A memento of the day I learned exactly what my daughter thought I was worth. The rest of the week passed in a haze of hurt and confusion. I called the bank to revoke Melissa's access to my account, a conversation that left me feeling both empowered and devastated. The customer service representative was professional and efficient, asking no questions about why I needed to protect myself from my own family. Margaret called twice, sensing something was wrong in my voice during our brief conversations. I wasn't ready to tell her what had happened. The shame felt too raw, too personal. How do you explain that your only child sees you as nothing more than a convenient source of funding? Saturday evening found me sitting in my recliner, trying to focus on a book but finding the words blurring together on the page. The house felt different now, smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of my disappointment. The lottery drawing was scheduled for later that night, though I'd forgotten about it completely until the local news mentioned the jackpot had rolled over to $120 million. I glanced toward my wallet, where that crumpled ticket waited like a monument to broken promises. $120 million. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. More money than Eric's cruise cost, more than Melissa's house, more than everything I'd ever dreamed of combined. The odds were still astronomical, but for the first time in days, I felt something that might have been amusement. What would Melissa say if those numbers actually came up? Would she remember her claim to half the winnings? Would she suddenly rediscover her affection for her worthless old father? I turned on the television just as the lottery drawing began, more out of curiosity than hope. The announcer's voice carried that artificial enthusiasm reserved for game shows and sales pitches. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Powerball drawing. Tonight's jackpot stands at $120 million. The first ball dropped into the machine with ceremonial importance. 7. I glanced at my wallet, feeling a flutter of something I couldn't quite name. The second ball followed. 14, then 23. My heart began beating faster, though I told myself it was just coincidence. Lottery drawings happened every week, and someone had to have those numbers. It didn't mean anything. 35, 42. I was on my feet now, wallet in hand, pulling out that wrinkled ticket with shaking fingers. The numbers blurred as I tried to focus on them, comparing them to what I'd just heard. And tonight's Powerball number is 18. The ticket fell from my numb fingers, fluttering to the carpet like a wounded bird. I stared at it in disbelief, then back at the television screen where the winning numbers were displayed in bright, impossible clarity. 7, 14, 23, 35, 42. Powerball 18. Every single number matched perfectly. I stood frozen in my living room, staring at the lottery ticket on my carpet like it might suddenly burst into flames. The television continued its cheerful broadcast about jackpot winners and celebration procedures, but the words seemed to come from another universe entirely. $120 million. The number kept repeating in my mind, bouncing around like a pinball that couldn't find its way home. I bent down and picked up the ticket with trembling hands, holding it up to the lamplight as if the numbers might somehow rearrange themselves into something less life-altering. They didn't. 7, 14, 23, 35, 42. Powerball 18. Perfect matches, every single one. I sank back into my recliner, the ticket clutched against my chest like a lifeline. My modest living room looked exactly the same as it had 5 minutes earlier, but everything felt fundamentally different. The worn carpet beneath my feet, the family photos on the mantel, the simple furniture I'd accumulated over decades of careful budgeting, all of it now belonged to a millionaire. The phone rang, jolting me back to reality. Margaret's name appeared on the caller ID, and I realized she must have seen the lottery numbers announced on her local news station. "Steve, did you buy a ticket this week?" Her voice carried that excited energy people get when they think they might know a lottery winner. "Yes," I managed to croak out. "Yes, I did." "Well, did you check your numbers? The jackpot was huge this week." I looked down at the ticket in my lap, those magical digits that had just transformed my entire existence. "Margaret, I need to sit down." "You're sitting down, aren't you?" "Steve, what's wrong with your voice?" I won. Silence stretched across the line for what felt like an eternity. Then Margaret's voice came back, higher-pitched and breathless. "You won what, like $100? 1,000? "All of it, Margaret. I won all of it." The sound that came through the phone might have been laughter or crying or both. "Steve, are you absolutely certain? Have you checked the numbers 3 times, 4 times?" I rattled off the winning numbers from memory, then read them from my ticket, then compared them to what was still displayed on my television screen. Each verification made the impossible truth more real. "Oh my God," Margaret whispered. "Steve, you're rich. You're actually rich." Rich. The word felt foreign in my mouth, like trying to speak a language I'd never learned. I'd been poor for so long that financial security seemed like an impossible dream, let alone wealth beyond my wildest imagination. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked. That was the question, wasn't it? What does a 70-year-old man do with more money than most people see in multiple lifetimes? What do you do when the daughter who stole from you and dismissed you as worthless suddenly becomes very interested in maintaining family relationships? "I don't know," I admitted. "I honestly don't know." We talked for another 20 minutes, Margaret's excitement gradually giving way to practical concerns about lawyers and financial advisors and security measures. She'd watched enough news stories about lottery winners who lost everything or had their lives ruined by sudden wealth. "Don't tell anyone else yet," she warned. "Not until you've got proper legal protection in place. And Steve, be very careful about who you trust with this information." After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, too stunned to turn on additional lights. The lottery ticket remained in my hands, now slightly damp from my sweaty palms. Outside, my neighborhood continued its normal Saturday evening routine. Mrs. Patterson was probably watching her crime shows, the Hendersons were likely putting their grandchildren to bed after a weekend visit, and Mr. Chen was probably reading in his study with classical music playing softly in the background. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that the quiet widower in the house on Maple Street had just become one of the wealthiest individuals in the state. My thoughts inevitably turned to Melissa, the daughter who had casually claimed half ownership of any potential winnings just a week ago. The same daughter who had stolen $13,000 from my account to buy her father-in-law a luxury cruise while tossing me a $2 lottery ticket like I was some kind of charity case. If you win, just remember, I bought it, so technically half belongs to me. Her words echoed in my memory with crystal clarity. Half belongs to me. Not, I hope this brings you luck, or wouldn't it be wonderful if you won something nice? Instead, she'd immediately established ownership rights over money that didn't exist yet, treating my potential good fortune as her personal windfall. The irony was almost poetic. She'd purchased that ticket with money stolen from my own account, then demanded partial ownership of any winnings. Even in her moment of giving, she'd managed to take from me twice. First my money, then my potential prize. I walked to my kitchen and made a cup of tea, my hands still shaking slightly as I went through the familiar motions. Steam rose from the mug as I settled back into my chair, the lottery ticket now lying on the coffee table where I could see it clearly. $120 million. Even after taxes, it would be enough to live like a king for whatever years I had remaining. I could travel the world, buy a mansion, purchase luxury cars, eat at the finest restaurants. All the things that Eric took for granted, all the experiences that people like him considered basic necessities rather than impossible dreams. But more importantly, I would have power. For the first time in years, I would have the ability to make choices based on my own desires rather than financial limitations. I could be generous with people who deserved it, and I could withhold support from those who had proven themselves unworthy of my trust. The phone rang again, interrupting my contemplation. This time, it was an unknown number, probably a telemarketer or wrong number. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately heard another call coming in from a different unknown number. Word traveled fast in the age of internet and social media. Someone, somewhere, had already connected my name to the winning ticket. By tomorrow morning, my quiet life would be turned upside down by reporters, distant relatives, and every charity organization within a 100-mile radius. I needed to act quickly before the circus arrived at my doorstep. The next morning brought a parade of phone calls and unexpected visitors. I'd unplugged my landline after the fifth call from reporters, but my cell phone continued buzzing with unknown numbers. Through my kitchen window, I could see a news van parked across the street, its satellite dish extended like a mechanical flower reaching toward the sky. Margaret arrived at 8 in the morning with coffee and bagels, her face flushed with excitement and concern. "There are reporters outside," she said, settling into my kitchen chair with the authority of someone who'd appointed herself my unofficial manager. "I told them you weren't available for comment, but they're persistent." "How did they find out so quickly?" "Lottery officials confirmed the winning ticket was sold locally. Some reporter probably called every store in town until they found the right one, then started cross-referencing credit card purchases." She paused to sip her coffee. "Steve, you need professional help with this. Not just financial advice, but security, legal protection, the whole works." I nodded, though part of me still couldn't quite believe this was really happening. Yesterday, I'd been a retired mechanic living on a modest pension, worried about whether I could afford to replace my aging water heater. Today, I was hiding from news crews while discussing security measures and wealth management strategies. "Have you heard from Melissa?" Margaret asked carefully. The question I'd been dreading. "Not yet, but she will call. Probably soon." "What are you going to do when she does?" I looked out at the news van, then at the lottery ticket sitting on my counter like a small rectangular miracle. What was I going to do? The daughter who had dismissed me as worthless would suddenly discover renewed affection for her dear old dad. The same person who had stolen from me without hesitation would now expect to benefit from the very ticket she'd thrown at me like scraps. "I'm going to remind her of what she said," I replied, "about how half belonged to her." Margaret's eyes widened slightly, and then I'm going to give her exactly what she deserves. My phone buzzed with yet another unknown number. This time, I answered it. Mr. Woods, this is Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. We'd love to interview you about your lottery win. Our viewers are fascinated by your story. I'm not interested in interviews, I said politely. We understand this must be overwhelming, but people love hearing about regular folks who hit it big. It's inspiring. We could do a nice piece about your plans for the money, maybe talk about your family's reaction. My family's reaction, if only she knew. No thank you, I said, ending the call. Margaret was watching me with concern. They're not going to give up easily. I know, that's why I need to get out of here for a while. Let things settle down. Where will you go? I thought about that for a moment. Where does a newly minted millionaire go to escape the chaos of sudden fame? Hotels would be too public, and staying with friends would only put them in the spotlight as well. I'll figure something out, I said. But first, I need to make sure this ticket is properly secured and validated. The Ohio Lottery Commission offices in Columbus were more impressive than I had expected. Glass towers reaching toward gray clouds, with security guards and an atmosphere of serious business that made my modest suburban life feel very small and distant. I'd driven there in my 15-year-old Honda, wearing my best dress shirt and the tie Melissa had given me 3 Christmases ago. The irony of that wasn't lost on me, celebrating my lottery win while wearing a gift from the daughter who had stolen from me to buy that very ticket. The lottery official, a professional woman named Janet Chen, greeted me with the kind of warm efficiency reserved for people who were about to make her agency look very good in the news. Mr. Woods, congratulations on your remarkable win. I understand this ticket has quite a story behind it. You could say that, I replied, handing over the precious slip of paper that had transformed my life overnight. She examined it under some kind of specialized scanner, comparing the numbers to their official records, checking for any signs of tampering or fraud. The process took longer than I'd expected, but eventually she looked up with a satisfied smile. Everything checks out perfectly. You are indeed the winner of last night's jackpot. She paused, studying my face with professional curiosity. Most winners are a bit more excited at this point. I'm still processing it all, I admitted. That's completely normal. Sudden wealth can be overwhelming, especially for someone who's never experienced it before. She pulled out a thick folder of paperwork. Now, let's discuss your options for claiming the prize. The next hour passed in a blur of legal documents, tax implications, and payment schedules. I could take the money as annual installments over 30 years or accept a smaller lump sum immediately. The choice seemed obvious. At my age, 30 years of payments might outlast my ability to enjoy them. The lump sum after taxes will be approximately $72 million, Janet explained. Still a life-changing amount by any measure. $72 million. More money than I could have imagined in my wildest dreams, more than enough to live comfortably for whatever time I had remaining, more than enough to be generous with people who deserved generosity and firm with those who didn't. There is one thing you should be aware of, Janet continued. Given the media attention your win has generated, we'd recommend keeping a low profile for the next few weeks. Sudden wealth can attract all kinds of unwanted attention. As if to prove her point, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. I glanced at it, then turned the device off entirely. I'm beginning to understand that, I said. The drive home took me through neighborhoods I'd known for decades, past the grocery store where I'd carefully counted coupons for years, past the gas station where I'd always chosen regular unleaded because premium was too expensive. Everything looked exactly the same, but I felt like I was seeing it all through different eyes. I was no longer the careful pensioner who checked prices twice before making any purchase. I was no longer the father who had to accept whatever treatment his ungrateful daughter chose to dish out. I was no longer the man who had to smile politely while being dismissed as worthless by people who measured human value in dollar signs. I was someone with choices now, someone with power, someone who could afford to stand up for himself without worrying about the financial consequences. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway, and for the first time in days, I recognized the number immediately. Melissa. I stared at her name on my phone screen for several rings before finally answering. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Hello, Melissa. Dad, oh my God, is it true? Her words tumbled out in a rush of excitement. Mrs. Henderson called and said there were news trucks on your street. She said you won the lottery. Please tell me it's true. The same daughter who had hung up on me just days ago when I confronted her about stealing my money now sounded like she could barely contain her joy. The transformation was remarkable in its speed and transparency. Yes, it's true. A sound came through the phone that might have been a squeal of delight. Dad, this is incredible. This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to our family. How much? How much did you win? $120 million. Silence stretched across the line for a heartbeat, then explosive laughter. Oh my God, Dad, we're rich. We're actually rich. Do you realize what this means? We can pay off the house, get David's business properly funded, maybe buy that vacation home we've always talked about. We. The word hit me like a slap across the face. We're rich. We can pay off debts, we can buy houses. As if my lottery win had automatically become community property the moment the numbers were announced. Melissa, do you remember what you said when you gave me that ticket? What do you mean? You said if I won, half would belong to you because you bought it. Her laughter this time carried a note of relief, as if she'd been worried I might have forgotten our supposed agreement. Of course I remember. I was half joking, but technically it's true, right? I did buy the ticket. We're family, Dad. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. The casual assumption of ownership was breathtaking. No gratitude for years of sacrifice, no acknowledgement of the money she'd stolen, no recognition that she'd treated me like garbage just a week earlier. Simply the expectation that my good fortune would automatically become her windfall. Actually, Melissa, there's something we need to discuss about that ticket. What kind of something? Dad, you're making me nervous. I walked to my kitchen table and sat down, looking out at the news van still parked across my street. Reporters waited patiently for their story, having no idea they were about to witness something far more dramatic than a typical lottery winner interview. I know about the $13,000. The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing. What $13,000? The money you took from my account to buy Eric's cruise, the premium travel services charge that appeared on my bank statement. Dad, I told you about that. Eric deserved something special. You stole from me, Melissa. You took my money without permission and used it to buy an expensive gift for someone else while giving me a $2 lottery ticket. Her voice shifted, taking on that defensive tone I'd heard during our previous conversation. It wasn't stealing. You weren't using that money anyway. It was just sitting in your account doing nothing. It was my retirement security, money I saved by eating generic food and driving an old car so I could have something put aside for emergencies. Well, now you have $70 million, so I don't see what the big deal is. The callousness of her response left me momentarily speechless. She'd reduced my life savings to pocket change, dismissed my financial security as irrelevant now that I'd won the lottery through pure chance. The big deal is that you bought that lottery ticket with my own money, then demanded half of any winnings. You stole from me twice, Melissa. Dad, you're being ridiculous. Family helps family. That's what we do. Is that what we do? Because when I needed respect and consideration from my family, what I got was theft and dismissal. I could hear voices in the background on her end of the call, probably David asking what was happening. The excitement in her voice was giving way to something sharper, more calculating. Look, we can argue about the details later. Right now, we need to focus on managing this money properly. I've already called a financial advisor I know, and David thinks we should set up some kind of family trust to protect the assets. We again. They'd already started spending money that didn't belong to them, making plans for wealth they'd never earned. Melissa, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. I'm listening. You claimed that half of any lottery winnings belonged to you, correct? Yes, that's what we agreed. Then you're absolutely right. Half does belong to you. I could practically hear her smile through the phone. I knew you'd be reasonable about this. So when can we meet to discuss how to handle the money? I think we should probably open a joint account, maybe set up some investments. Melissa, the ticket cost $2. What? The lottery ticket you bought me cost exactly $2. If half the ticket belongs to you, then you're entitled to half of what you paid for it. The silence stretched longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. What are you saying? I'm saying your share of the lottery ticket is $1. That's what half of your $2 purchase comes to. Dad, that's not what I meant, and you know it. But that's what you said. You said half belonged to you because you bought it. Well, you bought a $2 ticket, so your half is worth exactly $1. Her breathing became more rapid, and I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. You can't be serious. We're talking about $60 million. No, we're talking about $1. Your share of what you actually purchased. This is insane. No court would uphold that interpretation. What court? You want to take your father to court over lottery winnings? The question hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Here was my daughter, the little girl I'd raised and supported and loved unconditionally, threatening legal action because I wouldn't hand over millions of dollars I'd won through pure chance. I just mean that any reasonable person would understand what I meant when I said half belonged to me. Any reasonable person would understand that stealing $13,000 from your father is wrong. Any reasonable person would be grateful for 32 years of love and support instead of demanding more money before the ink is even dry on the lottery ticket. Dad, please. You're upset about the money I borrowed, and I get that. We can work something out. But you can't punish me by keeping all the lottery money. Borrowed. She'd reduced theft to borrowing, as if taking money without permission was simply an informal loan between family members. I'm not punishing you, Melissa. I'm giving you exactly what you're entitled to based on your own words. My own words? You said half of the ticket belonged to you because you bought it. The ticket cost $2. Your half is $1. That's simple mathematics. I could hear her crying now, the sound muffled as if she'd covered the phone with her hand. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears and desperation. Dad, you can't do this to me. We have debts, obligations, responsibilities. David's business is struggling, and we owe money on the house. I need this lottery money. You need my lottery money. It's family money. No, Melissa, it's my money. Won with a ticket you gave me as a gift, purchased with money you stole from my account. I didn't steal anything. Then what would you call taking $13,000 from someone's bank account without their permission? Another long pause, filled with the sound of her ragged breathing. I would call it family helping family during difficult times. The complete lack of remorse in her voice was staggering. Even now, faced with the consequences of her actions, she couldn't bring herself to admit wrongdoing. Instead, she'd reframed theft as generosity, turned criminal behavior into family obligation. Melissa, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think carefully before answering. What question? In the 32 years since you were born, how much money do you think I've spent on you? What kind of question is that? A fair one. Food, clothing, housing, medical care, education, wedding expenses, help with your house down payment, car repairs, emergency loans that were never repaid. How much do you think all of that adds up to? I don't know. I never kept track. I have. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every time I chose to give you something instead of buying something for myself. Would you like to know the total? Not really. Over $400,000. That's what I've invested in your life and future. The numbers seemed to echo in the silence that followed. $400,000 in today's money, representing decades of careful saving and selfless giving. Dad, that's what parents do. That's their job. And what's a child's job, Melissa? What do children owe their parents? I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to say that stealing from me was wrong. I want you to say that you're sorry for taking my money and dismissing me as worthless. I want you to acknowledge that respect and gratitude matter more than expensive cruise tickets. Fine, I'm sorry about the money. Are you happy now? The apology was delivered with the enthusiasm of someone apologizing for stepping on a stranger's foot. Perfunctory, meaningless, designed to get her what she wanted rather than express genuine remorse. No, Melissa, I'm not happy. I'm heartbroken. Then give me my share of the lottery money and we can move past this. Even in the midst of her apology, she was still demanding payment, still treating our relationship as a transaction where her temporary regret could be exchanged for millions of dollars. Your share is $1. Dad, please, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You established the terms yourself when you gave me that ticket. Half belongs to you because you bought it. The ticket cost $2, so your half is worth $1. That's not what I meant, and you know it. But that's what you said. Words have meaning, Melissa. Actions have consequences. I could hear David's voice in the background now, apparently coaching her on what to say next. Their whispered conversation lasted nearly a minute before she returned to our call. "Dad, David thinks we should all meet in person to discuss this calmly." "There's nothing to discuss. You gave me a lottery ticket as a gift. I won. The money is mine." But I said half belonged to me. "Half of a $2 ticket, which is $1. You're being cruel." "I'm being accurate. This will destroy our relationship." The threat was delivered with the confidence of someone who'd always been able to manipulate my emotions through fear of abandonment. For 32 years, the possibility of losing my daughter's love had been my greatest weakness, the lever she could pull whenever she wanted something. But something fundamental had changed in the past week. The theft, the dismissal, the casual cruelty had broken something inside me that couldn't be repaired with threats or tears or desperate apologies. "Melissa, you destroyed our relationship when you decided I was worth less than Eric. When you stole from me to buy someone else an expensive gift while throwing me table scraps. When you looked me in the eye and told me I didn't matter because I'd only done what fathers are supposed to do. I never said you didn't matter. You said Eric went above and beyond while I just did what fathers are supposed to do. You said he deserved recognition while I deserved lottery tickets. You took my money to celebrate him while treating me like a burden." I was upset. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. "Yes, you did. And that's why your share of my lottery winnings is exactly $1. The line went quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally, her voice came back small and defeated. $1. $1. That's really what you're going to give me? Your own daughter? That's what you're entitled to based on your own words. And the rest, all $60 million, will be used for purposes I consider worthwhile." Like what? I looked around my modest kitchen, thinking about all the people who had shown me genuine kindness over the years. Margaret, who had called to check on me every week since my wife died. Mrs. Patterson, who brought me vegetables from her garden and never asked for anything in return. Mr. Chen at the corner store, who always inquired about my health and remembered my preferences. Like helping people who understand the difference between love and greed. "Dad, you're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life." Her voice had turned cold, calculated. The tears were gone, replaced by something harder and more familiar. This was the Melissa I'd come to know in recent years, the one who emerged whenever she didn't get what she wanted. "Am I? Or am I finally making the right choice? When you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you, remember this conversation. Remember how you chose money over family." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. For decades, that fear had controlled me. The terror of ending up alone, forgotten, unwanted by the only family I had left. But sitting in my kitchen with $70 million and a crystal clear view of my daughter's true character, that fear felt smaller somehow. "Melissa, I've been taking care of myself just fine. And if that changes, I'll hire professionals with my own money rather than depend on someone who steals from me." "You're going to die alone." The words were meant to cut deep, to reopen old wounds about loneliness and abandonment. Instead, they bounced off me like rain on a windshield. "Maybe, but I'll die with my dignity intact." The line went dead with a sharp click that echoed through my quiet kitchen. I set the phone down gently and looked around at my modest home. The same furniture, the same family photos, the same careful decorations that had surrounded me for years. Nothing had changed physically, yet everything felt different. For the first time in decades, I felt truly free. Over the next few weeks, I discovered that having money was less about luxury and more about options. I hired a security company to deal with the reporters who still occasionally appeared at my door. I retained a law firm to handle the inevitable legal challenges Melissa would mount. I employed a financial advisor who understood the difference between preserving wealth and flaunting it. The phone calls from my daughter became less frequent, but more desperate. Voice messages that alternated between fury and false sweetness, between threats and hollow apologies. I listened to each one once, then deleted it. Her lawyer contacted my lawyer with demands for mediation. My lawyer politely declined. Margaret visited regularly, bringing news from the outside world and helping me navigate the strange new reality of sudden wealth. She was the only person I trusted completely with knowledge of my plans. The Single Fathers Foundation sounds wonderful, she said one afternoon, reviewing documents spread across my kitchen table. Your wife would be proud. The foundation had been my idea, a way to help men who found themselves raising children alone, just as I had after my wife's death when Melissa was 15. Real support, not just financial assistance, counseling services, educational resources, community programs that understood the unique challenges of single fatherhood. It feels right, I said, using the money for people who actually need help rather than people who just want more luxury. And the scholarship program? For kids who can't afford college but have the grades and work ethic to succeed. Kids whose parents sacrifice everything to give them opportunities. Unlike children who took those sacrifices for granted and repaid them with theft and contempt. Margaret nodded approvingly. What about Melissa? Has she tried to contact you recently? Every few days. The messages are getting more creative. I pulled out my phone and played the most recent voicemail. Melissa's voice filled the kitchen, syrupy with artificial emotion. Dad, I've been talking to a therapist about our situation. She says that sudden wealth can cause family trauma and that we need professional mediation to work through our issues. I've found someone who specializes in lottery winner family dynamics. Please call me back so we can heal our relationship properly. Margaret rolled her eyes. Lottery winner family dynamics, she's really reaching now. She hired a private investigator to research my spending patterns. Apparently, she thinks if she can prove I'm being irresponsible with the money, she can get a court to intervene. What did the investigator find? I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd enjoyed in months. That I bought a slightly newer used car and started shopping at the regular grocery store instead of the discount one. Hardly evidence of financial recklessness. The truth was, I'd been remarkably conservative with my newfound wealth. The house remained the same. My lifestyle barely changed except for small improvements that enhanced comfort rather than status. New windows that didn't leak cold air, a reliable car that started every time, quality food that didn't require coupon calculations. The real changes were invisible. The absence of financial anxiety, the freedom to be generous without sacrifice, the power to say no without consequences. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid of unexpected expenses or worried about stretching my pension until the next month. There's something else, I told Margaret, something I haven't mentioned to anyone. She leaned forward with interest. I've been thinking about moving. Moving? Where? Somewhere new, somewhere Melissa can't just show up whenever she wants to apply pressure. Maybe Florida, maybe Arizona, somewhere warm where I can start fresh. The idea had been growing in my mind for weeks. Why stay in a place filled with memories of disappointment and betrayal? Why remain accessible to people who saw me as nothing more than a source of funding? What about your friends here, your life? What? What life, Margaret? I have you and you're always welcome to visit. But what else is keeping me here? The neighbors who whisper about me when they think I can't hear. The grocery store where people stare and point. The constant reminder of how little I meant to my own daughter. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. You're really serious about this? I am. I've already contacted a realtor in Sarasota. There's a nice community there, active seniors, golf courses, libraries, places where I can be just another retiree instead of the lottery winner who fought with his daughter. When would you go? Soon, maybe next month. The foundation will be managed by professionals, the scholarships will be administered through the state university system, and everything else can be handled remotely. A knock at my front door interrupted our conversation. Through the window, I could see a familiar figure on my front porch, Eric, looking uncomfortable in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension used to be. Well, I said to Margaret, this should be interesting. I opened the door to find Eric fidgeting with his car keys, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. Stephen, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I was hoping we could talk. About what? About this situation with Melissa, about the lottery money. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I think there might be a way to resolve things that would benefit everyone. I stepped aside to let him enter, curious about what kind of proposal he might have prepared. Eric glanced around my modest living room with barely concealed disdain, his eyes lingering on furniture that probably seemed shabby compared to his own expensive tastes. Would you like some coffee? I offered. That would be nice. In the kitchen, Eric sat across from me at the same table where Melissa had thrown that lottery ticket just weeks earlier. Margaret had discreetly moved to the living room, giving us privacy while remaining close enough to intervene if necessary. Stephen, I want to start by saying that I think this whole situation has gotten out of hand. How so? Families shouldn't fight over money. It's destructive, it's painful, and it accomplishes nothing positive. He leaned forward with practiced sincerity. I've seen what financial disputes can do to relationships. They tear people apart permanently. I sipped my coffee and waited for him to get to his point. What I'm proposing is a compromise, something fair that acknowledges both perspectives. Go on. Melissa feels she has a legitimate claim to half the lottery winnings based on your verbal agreement. You feel that claim is excessive given the circumstances. Eric pulled out a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. What if we settled on a middle ground, say $10 million? The number hung in the air like a challenge. $10 million, more money than most people would see in multiple lifetimes, offered as a compromise for a $2 gift. $10 million. It's generous enough to solve all of Melissa's financial problems while leaving you with more money than you could spend in your remaining years. Everyone wins. And why exactly are you involved in this negotiation, Eric? His composure slipped slightly. I care about this family. I've watched Melissa suffer over this situation, and I've seen how it's affecting you too. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to find solutions. An outside perspective, is that what you call it? Stephen, I know you're angry about the cruise situation. I understand why you feel betrayed. But that money is insignificant compared to what you've won. This is an opportunity to heal the relationship and move forward positively. I set down my coffee cup and studied Eric's face. Beneath the diplomatic language and reasonable tone, I could see something hungrier. This wasn't about family harmony or healing relationships. This was about money. Pure and simple. Eric, let me ask you something. How much of that $10 million would actually go to Melissa? What do you mean? I mean, how much would end up paying for your lifestyle, your debts, your business investments, your expensive tastes that she's been funding with stolen money from my account? His mask slipped further, revealing irritation that he quickly tried to conceal. I resent the implication that I'm somehow manipulating this situation for personal gain. Are you? Of course not. This is about family, about doing what's right. What's right is acknowledging that theft has consequences. What's right is understanding that gifts don't come with retroactive ownership claims. What's right is accepting that my money belongs to me, not to people who treated me like garbage until they realized I might be useful to them. Eric's diplomatic facade finally cracked completely. Stephen, you're being unreasonable. $10 million is more than fair compensation for a $2 lottery ticket. Compensation? Eric, that ticket was a gift. Gifts don't require compensation. But she said half belonged to her. She said half of the ticket belonged to her. The ticket cost $2. Her half is worth $1. That's ridiculous, and you know it. What's ridiculous is grown adults expecting to inherit millions of dollars because they bought someone a lottery ticket. What's ridiculous is stealing money to buy expensive gifts for some people while throwing scraps at others. What's ridiculous is thinking I'm stupid enough to reward that behavior. Eric stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Fine. Be stubborn. But don't expect this family to forget how you treated Melissa when she needed you most. Yeah, how I treated her. Eric, she stole $13,000 from my bank account. She called me worthless. She claimed ownership of money that didn't exist yet. And now you want me to reward all of that with $10 million? I want you to act like a father instead of a miser. The insult hit exactly where he'd intended, but instead of causing pain, it clarified everything I needed to know about Eric's true character. Get out of my house. Stephen, I think you should reconsider. I said get out. Eric left without another word, his expensive shoes clicking across my modest floors as he retreated to his luxury car parked in my driveway. Through the window, I watched him sit in his vehicle for several minutes, probably calling Melissa to report the failure of his diplomatic mission. Margaret appeared in the kitchen doorway once his car disappeared down the street. Well, that was enlightening, wasn't it? $10 million, Margaret. They think I should hand over $10 million because Melissa bought me a $2 lottery ticket with my own stolen money. The entitlement is breathtaking. What's breathtaking is that they genuinely believe they deserve it, not want it, not hope for it, but deserve it as some kind of fundamental right. I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the neighborhood where I'd lived for decades. Mrs. Patterson was tending her garden, Mr. Chen was washing his car, the Henderson kids were playing basketball in their driveway. Normal people living normal lives dealing with normal problems. Margaret, I've made my decision about moving. When? Next week. I've already made an offer on a place in Sarasota and it was accepted this morning. She looked stunned. Next week? Stephen, that's awfully fast. I'm done with this, Margaret. Done with the manipulation, the threats, the constant pressure. Done with people who measure my worth by how much money I'm willing to give them. What about Melissa? What if she wants to reconcile genuinely? I thought about that question seriously. Was there any possibility that my daughter could change, could recognize her mistakes, and rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than financial dependency? If she ever wants a real relationship with me, not my money, but me, she knows how to find me. But it won't be on her terms anymore. It won't be about what I can do for her or how much I'm willing to sacrifice for her comfort. And if she doesn't, then I'll know I made the right choice. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after my conversation with Eric. I'd pared down my possessions to essentials: clothes, important documents, a few pieces of furniture with sentimental value, and the family photos that still held meaning despite everything that had happened. Margaret helped me supervise the loading process, both of us quiet with the weight of endings and new beginnings. Neighbors gathered on their porches and sidewalks, watching the lottery winner disappear from their lives as suddenly as he'd appeared in their headlines. "Yeah, are you sure about this?" Margaret asked as we watched my modest belongings disappear into the truck. "I've never been more sure of anything." My phone rang one final time as we stood in my empty living room. Melissa's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But something made me pick up the call. "Dad, where are you going? Mrs. Henderson said there's a moving truck at your house." "I'm relocating." "Where?" "Somewhere new." "Dad, please, we need to talk about this reasonably. I know you're angry, but running away won't solve anything." "I'm not running away, Melissa. I'm choosing to live somewhere I'm appreciated for who I am rather than what I can provide." "That's not fair. I appreciate you." "Do you? Or do you appreciate my bank account?" Silence stretched across the line before she spoke again, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix them. Please don't leave without giving me a chance to make things right." "What would making things right look like, Melissa?" "I don't know. Whatever you want it to look like. We could go to counseling together, or I could pay back the money I borrowed, or we could set up some kind of structured agreement about the lottery money." Even in her apology, she couldn't help but circle back to the lottery money. Even in her moment of supposed remorse, she was still negotiating for a share of my winnings. "Melissa, do you understand why I'm leaving? Because you're angry about the cruise money." "No, I'm leaving because you've shown me that I don't matter to you unless I'm useful. Because you measure my worth by my bank balance. Because you think love can be bought and sold like a commodity." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you visited without asking for money or help with something? When was the last time you treated me like a father instead of an ATM?" The questions hung in the air unanswered because we both knew the answers, and they weren't flattering. "Dad, I can change." "Can you?" "Because change would mean accepting that you're entitled to exactly $1 from my lottery winnings. Change would mean acknowledging that stealing from me was wrong without adding justifications. Change would mean building a relationship based on respect rather than financial dependency." $1? You're really only going to give me $1? And there it was. Even in her moment of supposed transformation, the money remained her primary concern. Not the relationship, not my happiness, not the chance to rebuild what we'd lost. Just the money. "Goodbye, Melissa." I ended the call and handed my phone to Margaret. "Would you make sure this gets forwarded to my new address? I don't want to carry any of this with me." The drive to Florida took 2 days through changing landscapes and shifting weather. I stopped overnight in a small Georgia town where nobody knew my name or my story, where I was just another traveler heading south toward sunshine and possibility. My new home in Sarasota was everything the realtor had promised. A comfortable ranch house in a community designed for active seniors with a golf course, library, and social center where people gathered for cards and conversation rather than gossip and judgment. The neighbors who welcomed me were retirees from all over the country, each with their own stories of family drama and life changes. Nobody asked about lottery tickets or estranged children. They were more interested in whether I played bridge or wanted to join the weekend fishing group. For the first time in decades, I felt like I could breathe freely. 6 months later, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. Melissa's handwriting on expensive stationery, the kind she used for important correspondence. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message. Dad, I hope you're happy with your choice. When you realize what you've lost, don't expect me to be waiting. Some mistakes can't be undone. Melissa. I read it twice, then walked to my kitchen and threw it away. Outside my window, palm trees swayed in the warm breeze, and I could hear the distant sound of my neighbors playing shuffleboard and laughing together. I'd lost a daughter who saw me as nothing more than a source of funding. In return, I'd gained something far more valuable, my self-respect, my freedom, and the knowledge that some prices are too high to pay, even for family. The lottery ticket that started it all sat framed on my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes the most expensive gifts come disguised as generosity, and sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in pain. Margaret visited for Christmas, bringing warmth and genuine affection to my new home. We cooked dinner together and exchanged modest gifts that carried meaning rather than price tags. As we sat on my porch watching the sunset, she asked the question I'd been expecting. Any regrets? I thought about it seriously, considering everything I'd gained and lost in the year since that Father's Day dinner. None, I said, and meant it completely. The money had changed my life, but not in the ways people might expect. It hadn't brought happiness or solved problems or created perfect relationships. Instead, it had revealed the truth about the relationships I already had, forcing me to choose between comfortable lies and difficult honesty. I'd chosen honesty, and while it hadn't been easy, it had been right. As the Florida sun set over my new life, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Real peace that came from living according to my own values rather than other people's expectations. The lottery winner who'd started this journey as a lonely widower, desperate for his daughter's approval, had become someone entirely different. A man who understood that respect couldn't be bought, that love couldn't be stolen, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to face the consequences of their own choices. Melissa had taught me that lesson, though not in the way she'd intended. And for that education, worth far more than any lottery jackpot, I would always be grateful. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Click the video on the left to hear another amazing story. Thank you for watching.